Hello, and welcome to the Metta Hour podcast with Sharon Salzberg. I'm Lily Cushman. I produce this podcast, and today we are coming to you with episode 254, a Fireside Chat with Ruth King. This is a series that features intimate conversations with longtime dharma teachers, really focusing on the early days of their practice, what brought them to teaching the dharma, and what the most impactful moments are that they've had with their own teachers. Originally, this was hosted by IMS Online, and today is the 6th episode in this series. So we're happy to be back, and today, Ruth King. Ruth has been on the podcast before, but it's been a while. Her original episode was in 2018. And if you don't know who she is, she's an incredible Dharma teacher. She's the founder of the Mindful of Race Institute. She's an author, educator, and she teaches meditation worldwide. You can find her at Spirit Rock Meditation Center, the Insight Meditation Society, and the Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program. Ruth also has several books out. Her most recent is Mindful of Race, Transforming Racism from the Inside Out. So it's wonderful to have Ruth back with us again. Today, she talks about how she first came to meditation, her first experience with Jack Kornfield, hearing him teach, and how that eventually evolved into her calling to teach the Dharma. She and Sharon talk about some of the initial misconceptions that they both had about meditation. And Sharon tells some old stories about her first teaching retreat, how Joseph Goldstein got his first teaching job. I'll give you a hint, it has to do with Ram Dass. And how Ruth began her teaching journey in the DC area. Ruth also talks about artistry and mindfulness, her BIPOC teaching and online academy, and what it's like for her to be in the season of her life as an elder, process of downsizing, of moving, and working in a very personal way with impermanence and letting go. She closes the episode with a wonderful guided meditation, and there's also some questions included from the audience of this original event. Before we get to the episode, a couple of quick announcements. I want to tell you more about IMS Online. This is a somewhat new virtual programming hub for the Insight Meditation Society that came about during COVID when the brick and mortar was closed. And they're doing all kinds of great stuff over there. It's a real mixture of one-off Dharma classes as well as ongoing sittings and series. So whether you're looking for a deeper way to access Dharma teachings, or perhaps are looking to do some community building, or you can't sit in person anymore and you want to sit virtually with people, I highly recommend IMS Online. You can check out everything they're doing there. And Sharon also pretty regularly does different offerings there, sittings, classes, book clubs, good stuff like that. Online, you could find them at dharma.org, which is dharma.org/IMS-online. Aside from that, Sharon is doing a bunch of different teaching in December and January. So you can head over to our events page on the website at sharonsalzberg.com. Also coming up in February, we have our annual Real Happiness Meditation Challenge, which will be starting February 1st. For $1 a day, you can get a month of meditations, either to start your home practice or to restart your home practice. And registration opens around January 1st for that, so stay tuned. Okay, so let's get to today's conversation. A fireside chat with Ruth King and Sharon Salzberg.
Hi, I'm so happy to be with you all. I'm so happy to be with Ruth. And I thought we might start just with a quite brief meditation, just to more fully gather our attention from whatever we were doing or wherever we were. It takes some energy to actually fully arrive. And so to help that process, let's just sit together a little bit. So you can sit comfortably, close your eyes or not. Can start by listening to sound, whether it's the sound of my voice or other sounds. Just a way of relaxing deep inside, just allowing your experience to come and go. Unless you're responsible for responding to the sound, let it wash through you. And bring your attention to the feeling of your body sitting, whatever sensations you discover. And then the feeling of your breath, just the normal, natural breath, wherever you feel it most distinctly. The nostrils or the chest or the abdomen. See if you can find that place. Bring your attention there and just rest. See if you can feel one breath without concern for what's already gone by, without leaning forward for even the very next breath, just this one. And if your attention wanders, you get lost in thought or you fall asleep, don't worry about it. You can realize you've been gone. Very gently see if you can let go and return your attention to the feeling of the breath. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze and we'll end the meditation. So thank you. And Ruth, welcome. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation.
It's my pleasure. Yeah.
So, for those of you who've tuned in before to these fireside chats, as we call them, know that the initial impulse for me happened when I was sitting on a stage with another friend, a colleague, Sylvia Borstein, and we didn't have anything really prepared. And she said to me, "Tell me just like what comes to mind if you think about like a really impactful thing a teacher said to you once." And I was sitting there like, duh, and what I found myself saying was undoubtedly true, which was when I had a teacher, a woman named Deepa Man. She's the person who told me to teach. And so that's what I said. I said, it's got to be when Deepa Man told me to teach, especially when she followed up that comment with two things. One was because I kept saying, no. I mean, I didn't say it because it would have been rude, but I kept thinking that's ridiculous, like that's absurd. I can't teach. What are you talking about? And she said, you're going to teach. And I said, no, I won't. And she said two things. One was, you really understand suffering. That's why you should teach, which I thought was a very interesting kind of, quality or criteria. And then she said, you can do anything you want to do. You're thinking you can't do it, that's going to stop you. So that's what I said when Sylvia asked me the question. And I thought, wow, it would be so great just to, sit down with treasured colleagues and friends and ask those kinds of questions, So, Ruth, is there something that a teacher has said to you that strikes you that way? It's kind of singular and impactful.
Well, thank you. Thank you again for the invitation to sit and just chat and just be in a flow with you on some of these questions and to actually try to remember. I think what I find striking from when I think about my journey, how it's not so much what the teacher has said as much as it is about the message. So what happens is it's almost like the transmission comes in. It all blends together, and then I'm feeling vibrationally what the truth is, and then what I should be doing. So I'm remembering that time that Marlene Jones Schoonover, who I met in China, invited me to join her at Spirit Rock. That was in Beijing, and she says, she asked me, do you meditate? I didn't even know her. And I said, well, no. And she said, well, where do you live? And I said, I'm in the Bay Area, as if everybody I meet in China would know where the Bay Area is, right? And she said, I live there too, and we need to meet. And we had tea. She was on the board and the diversity council at Spirit Rock at the time. Black woman, long dreadlocks. We both had big hair back at the time. And I joined her at Spirit Rock. And we went on a Monday night, which was Jack's teaching night. And one of the things I remember him saying, which he still says to this day, something to do with, oh, nobly born. The truth has always been within you. And he taught that evening on how to make sense out of the truth yourself. It's like, don't take my word for it, know for yourself. There was just something about that download that touched me so deeply, touched a place in me so deeply. It's kind of like what I think I've been needing to hear in a spiritual community, this sense of attunement where you touch into the truth in a very direct and known way, whatever that might be for you. The fact of not this blind faith out on someone else's word, but how does it resonate what is the practice that helps you know that potency directly? That was just like a pure download. And the next thing I knew was Spirit Rock. And fast forward, after being mentored by Jack for a good 10 years, he suggested that I teach. And it was the funniest thing. It wasn't a hard decision for me because I've always been a teacher, an educator of some sort. But what it did was it called me to speaking a truth that needed to be verified from my practice. So it was a big swallow. It's like, uh-oh, if I'm going to talk about this, I better know what the hell my experience is. So it was a deep call to intimacy with these teachings, which is really the deep calling for me, that there's something so profoundly intimate, tender, and bright about the practice that twinkles you into insight, that you don't have to believe because you know it. So that was one of those moments. There's been others along the way, but that was kind of an entry flow, and then kind of this galactic invocation that keeps me quivering when I teach, because I feel it and I also treasure it so much. And it's such an important offering to the world, especially at these times.
Do you think you had like misconceptions about meditation when you started? Like, I know I did. I had a ton of them, aside from all the self-judgment, I somehow had this thought in my head that really good meditation meant sitting bathed in like brilliant white light. And I don't have any light. I had a lot of other important things, some of which were painful, some of which were wonderful, but not light. So it was never enough until I kind of understood things better.
Yeah. No, I love that question. I think for me, the misconception was I think I was trying to get something. I was efforting. I was really trying to perfect myself, trying to get away from something, only to realize that it was really about being with what's here, and that my perspective is what was changing. How I was holding experience was what was changing. And that wasn't what I expected, I think there was some way the misconception was that I was going to be able to transcend it all. And by the way, in a few months, thank you very much.
If that, right?
If that, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm also wondering, when you said you'd always been a teacher, like for me, when I began teaching, I began teaching with Joseph, and the first retreat we were invited to do was this month-long retreat in California.
The first retreat was a month long?
The first retreat was a month-long retreat. We'd been at Naropa Institute before then, which was the initial summer that Naropa had opened, and Joseph, it's a whole complicated story, but Ram Dass was there as a teacher, and he had kind of a mega class. He had like 1,000 students, and he also divided it up so you could do the meditation subgroup or the chanting subgroup. Joseph led the meditation subgroup. So we always say Ram Dass gave Joseph his first teaching job. And I came along with a group of friends because I left India about 6 months after Joseph did. And basically we had nowhere to go. So we moved in with Joseph, who had a 1-bedroom apartment. And Jack lived down the hall. That's where we met Jack, teaching at Naropa. And I stayed on. Joseph was invited to teach the second summer session. So I stayed on and helped him. And then we got invited to teach this month-long retreat, which was the very first retreat. So I felt okay about talking to people individually. I felt okay about doing questions and answers. And I absolutely could not give a talk because I was petrified. So a 30-day retreat, right? Joseph had to give 30 talks. people would go up and yell at him saying, "Why won't you let her have a voice? Why won't you let her speak?" And he'd say, "I'd love a night off. Just talk to her, But I couldn't do it. And it was much later and largely through loving kindness practice that I could change that. But I'm just wondering, since you had been a teacher, as you said, was there anything that was more challenging for you when you began teaching Dharma?
Well, since I think I've been a teacher early on, my work in organizations as a training and development professional and organizational consultant professional. So I've always taught and led in that regard. But since that time, that was my earlier career. Since that time, I've become a writer. And the challenge of teaching the Dharma, the writing came in there at the same time I was kind of coming into the teacher role. And what's crazy making for me is I write my talks, right? And so I go through this utterly neurotic process of organizing my thinking only to get in the room and forget, just kind of go off script. So what I've found is that writing is a way that helps me organize my thinking so that I can let it go. But I think more to the point of teaching the Dharma, I have little voices that come in to my head that help me along the way. Like the first Dharma talk that I gave was with IMCW, with Tara Brock and Jonathan Faust and Pat Coffey. It was up in the DC area. And I'll never forget, I'm sweating. It was my first Dharma talk. I had organized it to the now. I probably could have written a book with that first talk. I had so many notes and had, all this. It was just so crazy. I was so upset with myself that I was doing this whole thing that I could witness. I'm seeing myself doing it and couldn't quite interrupt it. Finally got it down. I'm sitting down. They come over and help you with your mic, and Jonathan and Pat Coffey were standing around me. It's a group of about 130 people sitting out there waiting to hear the word. And if they're people like me judging everything you might say, right? That was all in my mind. And the last thing Jonathan Faust said to me, and both he and Pat Coffey were standing in front of me before they went and took their seat on the side. They said, "Don't fuck it up." And when they said that, I totally fell out of my seat in my head. I burst out laughing inside. I got a big smile on my face, and all of the anxiety just seemed to melt because it was really, they just cut right through the craziness that I was just in, all this tension and anxiety. And when they said that with a big smile on their face, I thought that was so hysterical. And that's what I saw as I was giving my talk, this message, this kind of, these jokesters kind of playing around with this message. Because there is no way to mess it up, right? If you're coming from that place of the best you can. It's just such a practice of leaving yourself alone and not judging yourself and noticing when you're doing that and finding a way to laugh at it. So that sticks in my head a lot when I'm thinking about teaching and being just kind of thrown in the ocean and you don't know how to swim, or you don't think you know how to swim. And then you learn the strokes and you learn to surrender to the water more and more. And you can get out in the deeper waters if, to give it a try. And you're learning, the Dharma is a constant teacher. I never feel like I've mastered anything or totally got it. It's just a holy, like a humbling experience that ripens and comforts and brightens the mind. And there's really no replacement for the practice itself other than teaching the practice, which is practice. So Yeah.
It's beautiful. My next question was going to be about you as a writer, if you wanted to talk about that a little bit, like what's that been like?
What it's been like to write?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is another example. This is like true confessions on my part.
Okay. Let's hear them, Sharon. Let's hear them.
Like for me, so much of what I write about is these sort of noble qualities like faith and loving kindness. And so I realized I had a great tendency in writing to get kind of almost like pompous, like everything was too fancy and too elevated. And my big challenge was always like, get real, like get down and just speak to people. And I always felt I'm not going to do the topic justice. And, how can I show up, possibly. And then, of course, I have to remember deep in my, you can do anything you want to do. It's just you can't do that's going to stop you. But I loved writing. I've always loved writing. And has not been an easy transition for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think writing is a very deep teacher in that sense. And there's just so many revelations. I think I write mostly to understand and to sort things out. And it just so happens that some of it gets into a place where it can be published. Sometimes it's terrifying for me to think about publishing before I kind of sort myself out. So I don't start always with that intention. Or I didn't early on. I think more and more now that I do. But I think my experience might be the opposite. I think I tend to say everything that I feel and then I have to back it up. It's like, wait a minute, because I'm more sensitive to the impact I have. It used to be, well, I shouldn't have to worry about that. I remember a writing friend saying, your job is to get the message out there. Let everybody else figure out what they want to do with it or how they want to be in relationship with it. But I've gotten so sensitive to impact and power dynamics and knowing that people read and take things so literally that I'm more nuanced, if you will. I don't know if nuanced is the right word, but I'm more sensitive to how my content lands. And I think that's even gotten more heightened since I've been in the Dharma because it's so clear how connected we are. And I'm so much more sensitive to the bruising, the innocence and ignorance that can happen, right? In our relational field when we're trying to teach and when we're trying to offer something really good. I appreciate that you write on those noble qualities because we have a river as writers, I think, that we ride. My writing has been around mindfulness and race and how mindfulness practice supports our relationship to racial distress and our deconstructing of our habitual conditioned mind. And so we get in our river, and it's a teacher as well as an offering. And I absolutely go mad when I'm writing. I'm just crazy when I'm doing it, and at the same time, I can't not do it. I do laugh at myself more often though. Because I can see the cartoonish craziness of how I organize the mind, and it's just never really been any other way. It's just how I do this creative process. So I'm actually, Sharon, finding that I'm curious these days about the relationship between artistry and mindfulness and the rhythms of music, for example, or dance, the vibration of sound and how it can mimic sometimes the breath. But when you're in the practice of attuning to mindfulness, you can almost hear a rhythm or feel a rhythm vibrationally. Or sometimes when I'm reading the teachings, it reads like poetry. And, I'm just finding that there's the musicality to it. I noticed Joseph is writing poetry now. There's been many of us practitioners that are moving into this rhythmic, poetic fluidity in the teaching as a form, as an offering. So I'm very curious about that and actually attempting to write about it. And so I'm noticing my own rhythm with writing and trying to just allow that to be what it is, and see what it's trying to teach me. So it's not a publication just yet, but I am quite fascinated with I remember being at a concentration retreat years ago, and my breath pattern seemed to mimic asanas and yoga, the flow of it. And I was just kind of blown away with that, to be in such a place of stillness that you can hear and feel these vibrational levels. I'm quite fascinated with it. And I grew up with music. I grew up with jazz. I grew up dancing, and I'm just very curious about these influences, if you will, which I see as rivers of mindfulness.
It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And you know what you're reminding me of? For some reason, Joseph, who does an annual intensive retreat in his house every year, and he said he found on Audible.com, in a company, there's some book where somebody is reading aloud the Buddhist suttas, and it's like poetry.
Really?
So he listens to it when he. So it's kind of like the Buddha's giving him his nightly talk or something like that. But it's very beautiful. Even though he doesn't understand the Pali, as such, it's a very beautiful thing. There's definitely a feeling we get. There's some kind of inner, like you said, resonance that happens. With something that's very beautiful. I'm also curious. Are there certain forms in which you prefer teaching, or certain populations? Like I know for myself, I went online with IMS in the beginning of the pandemic. We didn't know what else to do. And I really have loved it, in the sense of, just look at that chat, how many people from how many places have signed on. And it just feels like such an interdependent gathering. It's quite wonderful. And I also in the last many years have worked a lot and hope to work a lot more with the people we call caregivers, whether in their personal or professional lives, they're taking care of somebody. And I'm not sure it's the right word, caregiver, but it's such an immense number of people in that position. And all those principles of, like, what does it look like to seek balance or compassion for yourself as well as for somebody else, and have a sense of limits, and all the kinds of things we might talk about in an ordinary retreat are so relevant to their lives. And so I'm wondering for you, if there's some form or a population that is most inspiring to you right now.
Well, not in particular, but I have to say, the last couple of years I've been invited to teach in the BIPOC, and at Spirit Rock, we just had an African American retreat. I think it's the first one for Black women, identified women. And we had a good 97 people there with a wait list of around 97 people. And it excites me to see BIPOC folks coming into this practice, and feeling like they can. So I want to be a resource and of service to people who want me to teach them. So I leave myself available to that. But the biggest form, and like you, when the pandemic hit, I transitioned a lot of my educational programs to an online self-study on-demand process. And there's a lot of courses that are offered there that are audio, video, and on demand. And that's been really beautiful because it's accessible to so many people, like you're saying. I continue to be interested in this intersection of leadership, mindfulness, and racial awareness, and how we kind of come into a sense of harmonics from the inside out to connect in ways that are present. So I think that's still my form. I'm still serving a number of sanghas, leadership teams, teachers that are in sanghas, communities, nonprofits, and organizations, corporations that are looking at that intersection of racial awareness, leadership, and mindfulness as a tool for intervention. So that's kind of where I'm hanging out. My wife and I just downsized in February. So we're in a new home and, getting rid of a lot of stuff, clearing, we're both doing less, looking at getting a dog again. And I think we're just in a whole different stage. Speaking of caretaking, I'm wanting someone to come over here and take care of us, But you do get to that place of the questioning around what do you do? As health starts to change, community starts to change, the work is not what it was and doesn't need to be. So a lot of, I consider myself an elder, and, so a lot of those questions do come up at this stage in terms of what does service look like, and I am getting of that age where someone would hopefully would provide care, and I am at that age where I used to watch my great grandmother worrying about racism and sexism, and here I am worrying about my great grandkids. Right, being in a world where that's still so heightened and things are chaotic, and how do we learn to see the beauty shining through despite the intensity of the craziness that's there. So service becomes a bit more multi-dimensional, if not each moment, right? As a teacher, it feels like each moment is the teaching, each moment is the audience, each moment is the opportunity to remember.
Great. I want to also remind everybody that you can put questions in the Q&A, where the Q&A button is. I don't know that I can help you find it if you don't know where it is. And there's one question that's come in, which said, I've had chronic pain for 3 months, bursitis, tendonitis, etc. How do I live with this? Do you have a comment?
Yeah. Yeah, I would bet that you've done a number of things already to be with it. And, what I could say is that, I'm remembering going on a retreat and talking to Sally Armstrong. And I was describing this intense pain I was in. And her response to me was, yes, that's suffering. And there was something about that being affirmed as this is what's happening right now that was helpful, because I hadn't labeled it suffering, but it was a First Noble Truth, full form and high intensity. And I think what I could say is that it is present. It probably is pressing. It probably is beyond unpleasant. And if there could be a relationship with it that feels more spacious, or it can have more space, it can have more light, it can have more ease, you can hold the intensity of it in your arms and your heart and rock it like a little one. You've probably tried all these things, but there's no getting rid and hating it. I mean, turn down the volume of hating that it's happening. and bring a sense of tenderness to the woundedness that it represents. I hope that's helpful. Yeah.
And going back to the question of aging, which is up for so many of us, and it's quite a relevant dynamic, because it is a dynamic, and I remember I went to a retreat. My Tibetan teacher, Sonny Rinpoche, who's quite a bit younger than I am, was holding a retreat about aging, because I think he just saw his community of students, and and there was definitely aging. And I think I was, at that time, I was probably 60. I think I was the youngest person in the retreat, and somebody was waxing eloquent about kind of the beauties of aging and the wisdom and the perspective and the sense of humor and all of that. And Rinpoche said, all of that is true, but don't make a poem out of it. It can be really It can be really hard. In my experience, it was even in that retreat, I thought, there's so many things kind of casually. It's almost like a bucket list. I thought, someday I'd like to go to journalism school. Someday I'd like to do this. And as I got older, I thought, no, it's not going to happen. And seeing things kind of fall away. Although I said that, we had like little groups in the afternoon, and there was a woman who was 80 something, and she was about to do a bus tour of Tibet or something outrageous, and so she chastised me, like, don't think about abandoning every dream, like. And I thought it's just an interesting and intricate balance there.
Yeah, kind of a balance of, when is enough? And I mean, I have to say that a big part of my interest is to kind of lay back on a hammock and in the sun and see the dharma and everything. It's almost like maybe I can just let it in instead of going out. That's a piece. It's like, what can I allow to come in, and what are the subtleties, the different shades of orange when the sun is setting that I glance over. That exhale that I can just kind of fully enjoy. Can I do that? I don't feel like I have energy for a lot of the things I might want to. I mean, that's the truth of it. I'm not even making it up, right? I don't have the energy. I don't even know if I have the interest to do a lot of the things that come to my mind. It's just interesting to see the play of mind. Because it's like, oh, you sure you're going to leave this life and still not know how to swim after watching the Olympics, right? It's like, you sure? Remember you got that athletic body. You might have get out there, and it's like, I'm looking at my body. It's like, that's not what. I remember that. That wasn't that long ago. Yeah.
It's funny. I did have a bucket list some years ago, and I managed to get everything done. Everything I had hoped for, I got done. And I said to Joseph, do you think I'm going to die soon? And he said, make another list.
Oh, that's golden.
I don't know. I was like, how could it all get done? But there is something about not wanting so much and more kind of content, I guess. And it's wisdom.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of that word being associated with that, because there is this shedding that I feel that's natural and nature. That's what it feels like. It's like, oh, yeah, this season that I'm in, where the leaves are falling off the tree and the branches drooping, and there's some attention that's needed to really care for it. I remember being in, I don't know why this is coming up, but I remember being in Cuba once, and it's some of the buildings were really worn down. But for some reason, I was able to see the stateliness and just the pure elegance of the architecture that was there beyond the aging of the building, right? And it's like, and it was all there at once. It was like the beauty of it, the elegance that was once there was still there, in addition to, it needed some paint, it needed a whole bunch of other things, but it didn't really need any of that on some level. But it's all, when I look in the mirror, I see all of my life there, not just this moment. And there's something nice about that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So there was another question that came in, which I'm going to ask you. There are more. What are your thoughts on consciousness versus awareness? Are they the same or different?
Yeah, I don't really know if I have an answer to that. I could see them being, I think a lot has to do with what context they're being used in. So I don't.
Yeah, I think it is really contextual. Yeah. It's hard, outside of context.
Mm-hmm. I can see, I think context matters. So if there could be a more contextual question, it might be more a satisfying response could come.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes classically consciousness, and this again, it's totally depends on how you use the words, but consciousness sometimes is used simply to know, like, you're hearing a sound, you're hearing, you're hearing a sound, you're seeing an image, so it's, and sometimes they say consciousness is pure because of that. But how we know, this isn't exactly the difference between consciousness and awareness, more the difference between consciousness and mindfulness. How we know, we can know with hatred, we can know with love. So there are all these other factors that come in, and mindfulness would mean more like knowing without adding greed, hatred, or delusion to what you're perceiving. But again, that's a particular use of the words, and so you have to sort of play with it. I have another question. Due to a surgery that went sideways, my husband has become my caregiver. Hard for me to allow that sometimes, always having been fiercely independent. But how do you make sure he's okay in this new dynamic? Thank you never seems enough.
What a precious, precious attunement to not only your need for care, but your sensitivity to his need, which often gets lost in a caretaking role, I have to say. I do think there's a radiance that happens when your heart is genuinely serving someone. And sometimes words can actually get in the way of that. Pause where you're just meeting each other's eyes for a few breaths, and a hug that lasts more than a flash, or a handwritten note that, or a voice message or something that supports a certain flirtation, if you will, in the kinship, in the life of the relationship. One of the beautiful things about being in a partnership with someone where those roles start to shift is the remembrance that you've witnessed each other's lives over time. And that in itself is a medicine, is a salve, is a balm And and in the care that's actually being needed in the moment, tuning, an attunement in that moment, a grace, a good pause, I think could really be the best gift of all. And in terms of allowing, how do you allow yourself to have it being independent? Yeah, one breath at a time. I don't think this person is a stranger. They probably know they know how you are. Independence and all. And it could be a real tenderizing process to allow yourself to be helped without a lot of words, without a lot of explaining, without a lot of effort, and just taking each moment. I know that sounds maybe overly simplistic, but I think you get the message. Yeah.
I'll also add my great model in learning how to be taken care of was Ram Dass, who was actually a participant at my very first retreat in January of 1971. So I'd known him for a very long time, and we practiced together and hung out together in a whole variety of different circumstances. And then I forget what year, maybe 20 years before he died, 18 years before he died, he had this massive stroke. And it didn't seem like he was going to survive, and then he did. But he lived in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. His speech, which had been his superpower before, was very much affected. And teaching with him was always interesting because there would be a very long pause sometimes as he was searching for the word, and you knew damn well what he wanted to say, and you knew you couldn't interject. He had to find it. But, things were very different. So one day he had moved to Hawaii, and I was sitting in the back of the room as he was teaching. And he said, the hardest thing of all after the stroke, harder than living in a wheelchair, harder than the change in my speech, was having people take care of me. And it's totally true. I'd known him for so long. It's like he was just not comfortable, being thanked for anything, or he just wasn't that kind of person. So he said, but it was the hardest thing of all and the most liberating. And he said, one of my famous books was called How Can I Help? Now I feel like writing a book called How Can You Help Me?
Oh.
So it's a path. It's not an easy path, but it's a path all in and of itself.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love that story. Yeah.
So I'm curious too, Ruth, about your downsizing your house. So if it was an immediate move, you didn't put things in storage. I have friends who did put things in storage, and the stories are very funny. Like, I had this box in storage for 2 years, and I opened it up. It was really heavy, and I opened it up, and it was a box of rocks. Like, why did I save a box of rocks for 2 years? Or, why did I save that? Whatever it is, but it sounds like you just had an immediate process of letting go.
Oh, I wouldn't say it was immediate. My wife and I had been talking about moving for years, and I was more ready to move than she was. So, we had to work that out. I wanted something smaller, simpler, because I had moved from a larger property in Berkeley and then moved in with her in Charlotte. And she had a big house, but our thinking was that we would downsize within the next couple of years. 15 years later, right? We find, this townhouse, which is smaller, and we are so happy that we have a smaller, simpler space. But the and the process of getting rid of stuff has been both liberating, but also just a lot. Everything you touch in your house, you have to make a decision about. Do I throw it away? Do I pack it up? We did not store anything, and we didn't rent storage. Luckily, we have a space in the house for a few boxes we still need to go through. But I can't tell you, just looking at your life, I mean, many lives I had to touch, right, in this process of downsizing. And you talk about a shedding, many tears. And, it's, oh my gosh, I was married to this guy. I mean, it went deep, Sharon. I'm sorry. And then we just the other night, we finally got to the photograph box just the other night, and we put some music on and shared these photos, and found this service where we can have all these photos scanned, and then they're digital, and we don't have to carry these multiple boxes around. But it was a lot of fun, but a lot gets awakened again, and then there's just a lighter letting go that can happen in the process. But a lot of furniture, heavy furniture, is like the rocks. It's like carrying this stuff around is really less and less of a need. And of course, at this age, we're thinking, well, the next move, what's that about? And can we make decisions at this time that has that in consideration? Because that's the stage we're in our lives. And so it had a double layer of deciding with that. But I think we're in a good place now, but a lot of clearing, a lot of letting go. And it's good. Yeah.
Well, looking back over any number of years, like I recorded someone's podcast earlier today, and they said to me, "Do you have a retreat center?" And I said, "Oh yeah, it's called the Insight Meditation Society, and we founded it in 1976. So we're heading on toward our 50th anniversary." And so you think about that, in all these years, and things and stuff and experiences.
And legacy too. I mean, that's a beautiful thing when I think about IMS and these kind of anchors, where I know I can send my grandson there. There's these anchors of so many blessings, so much effort that's gone into the establishing of a place for practice that's trustworthy and good, that has these really soulful, generational, with my children coming through. I was teaching a retreat at IMS earlier this year, and there was, it was a BIPOC retreat actually, and there were 3 generations in the room that attended that retreat.
That's beautiful.
And the same is true with Spirit Rock's Black Women's Retreat that we did in April. 3 generations, grandmother, mother, daughter in the retreat. This is really important. Yeah. This is important.
So somebody put a question to me in the chat, which is basically about seeing change and seeing kind of the fleeting nature of things, speaking of that. But, I always think of change, especially these days, as having both aspects. One is like beginnings and openings and like springtime, renewal. And the other is, of course, we just can't hold on to anything. It's all and it's so fast, it's so fleeting. So I'm wondering, as you reflect yourself and as you teach, how you talk about change.
Yeah, I have to bring in a Josephism on this because it really has been a big mantra that lives like the elevator music in my mind often. And he said, it's not so much about letting go. It's understanding that you can't hold on. And to me, that's just such a potent message around change and impermanence and our misconception that we're in control and that, the truth of the matter is anything can happen to us at any time. So it's a calibration, that kind of message from Dear Joseph is a calibration message. It's like, let's line up again to what a deeper truth is, and soften around the hardness that the mind can shape itself around in situations when it comes to change, the hardness of letting go. So it's not like it's going to be, I know this, so then there it is, but it's to remember that and to keep remembering as you breathe through some of the intense wishes for things to be other than they are. I have a shortcut way of talking about the three characteristics, which is nothing in life is personal, permanent, or perfect. And that's another reminder of how to work with and be with impermanence and with suffering and with the tight solidity that we wrap around our identities, our beliefs, our notions of things, and to just right there soften with that a little bit, or at least question it.
Wondering if you would lead us in a meditation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely. A few minutes of just settling here with that idea. All right. Well, let me invite you then to just right where you are to settle into your seat and whatever posture you're in. And just feel this body connected to this earth. And really feel that contact. The fact that you're being held. You can release a little bit here and be held. And connecting with the breath, the movement of the breath inside the body, wherever you sense it. Just taking a moment to experience where it makes sense, the stillness in the body and the movement of the breath. And you probably might be thinking about a few thoughts from this conversation and questions you may have. Just allowing that to be in the background for now. Giving your priority, your attention to the sitting of the body and the movement of the breath. Softening any effort, softening any tightness in the face or throughout the body. Just inviting a softening without effort. And as you continue to enjoy the silence and the sitting or the lying down and the movement of the breath, the sensations of breathing, being curious about that. Just connect with your heart now. You might want to listen in and invite the heart to speak to you. Maybe a sense of warmth that permeates from the heart. Just see if there's a way to allow a connection with this warmth, however small. And just notice what happens as you connect to what the heart is offering. And the stillness of the body and movement of the breath. Noticing how sounds may come and go. Thoughts may come and go. And just allow your priority to be the silence and the stillness and the movement of the breath. Let's practice with this focus for the next couple of minutes. And when you're ready, with your next breath, can open your eyes and come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was really lovely. And I'm going to really remember nothing is permanent, perfect, or personal.
Yes.
She's a fantastic summary of 9,000 pages of the Buddhist
Right?
teaching.
I know.
She did really good. Okay, so unless somebody else has a question that you'd like to put in the Q&A button, we can say goodbye on that lovely note of that sitting.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone.
Hey folks, thanks so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Ruth King, you can head over to her website, ruthking.net, ruthking.net, and there you'll find her Mindful of Race online academy. She's got a free webinar, Let's Talk About Race, as well as her different books. For all things Sharon, including quite a few upcoming December and January teaching events, you can visit SharonSalzberg.com. This has been the Metta Hour podcast, brought to you by the Be Here Now Network. May you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, and may you live with ease.